And we are live. Hello, Mr. Bob McLeod.
McLeod, yeah, McLeod.
McCloud.
That's enough.
Yes, sorry. I don't know how to pronounce McCloud.
Yes, I guess the Scottish that it was based on would be McLeod.
McCloud.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's well, first of all, thank you very much for accepting my invitation. Well, my audience is really broad. There are a lot of geeks, but also music fans, a little bit of everything. So it will be great if you can introduce yourself in a few words.
Sure. I'm Bob McLeod. I've been a long-time comic book artist with Marvel and DC Comics primarily, but I've worked with several other comic publishers as well, and did some advertising artwork and a lot of side projects outside of comics. I did a children's alphabet book, Superhero ABC, where I created different superheroes for each letter of the alphabet. It's the only thing I've really written myself. I started out much more of a humor artist and hoped originally to have my own newspaper comic strip, a humorous comic strip, and maybe work for Mad Magazine, and then got lured into doing comic books for Marvel and DC by people around me, and there was a lot of work to be done at that time, so it was easy to get work in the beginning of my career. So I just kind of went with comics, and then my career took off, so I stayed with them.
Yeah. And to the people that don't know, but I think everyone that is a comic book fan, they know the New Mutants. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you are co-creator of the...
Yeah, I was very fortunate. Good timing. I had done a couple fill-in issues of the X-Men, penciling the X-Men, and the editor and Chris Claremont liked what I did on those X-Men fill-ins, so they offered me the chance to be co-creator on the New Mutants, or they said you could also become the regular penciler on the X-Men, because we need a new penciler for the X-Men.
Wow.
And it was a very tough decision, because I really wanted to draw the X-Men.
Yeah,
I didn't know if the New Mutants was going to be a success or not. You know, it was a gamble when it was starting out, whether it would just be a few issues and then die out, or what would go on with it. I mean, we had high hopes for it. We assumed it would be a success, but we really didn't know. I'm going to say X-Men was a proven success, and would have been a lot of fun to take over the X-Men. But then again, I figured I probably would never get another chance to be a co-creator on a new series, so I chose the New Mutants.
Yeah, no, that's great. So for the people that want to know a little bit more about you, or maybe buy some of your stuff, if I'm correct, is bobmcleod.com, right?
Yep. Yes.
Yeah, and we can see right away that you work in very very famous titles like Venom, SPIDERMAN, G.I. Joe, and of course the New Mutants. So I would like to start like trying to going back to the beginning of your career. How when you were little, when you were a kid, you were kind of a comic book fan, or more?
Not so much. Like I said, I was into humor. I started drawing about age 4 or 5, and knew right away that I really liked cartoons. I wanted to be some kind of cartoonist, rather than a fine artist, a painter, or whatever. I wanted to do cartoons. I liked the newspaper comics. And I read Archie comics and the Superman family of comic books. I would buy the Superman comics, and my sister would buy the Archie comics, and we'd swap off. I read all the Harvey line of comics, the Wendy the Good Little Witch and Casper the Ghost.
Oh, Casper, right?
A lot of comics like that for the
Sure.
humor. I didn't really get into comics except for Superman and Archie. I started reading Mad Magazine in middle school, and that really was where my interest was, satire and the humor. And Mort Drucker doing the movie satires and TV satires is what I wanted to do. And so I kind of stuck with Mad Magazine, the National Lampoon, when that came out a little later. I missed the whole Marvel Comics superhero revolution when Spider-Man came out and the Fantastic Four and all of that. Sure. I was reading Mad Magazine.
Yeah, but that's cool too. I think Mad Magazine really was kind of revolutionary for that time. Magazine that dared to, be satire, talk about politics, talk about different stuff, but with a sense of humor. That's great. We have something here in France. Well, I know maybe it's Charlie Hebdo.
I've heard of it. Sure.
But well, there's were a tragic story. The people get mad, and some people shoot other people because they don't have a sense of humor. But yeah, no, I think satire and that kind of comic, it could be really powerful. You can and fun at the same time.
And Mad Magazine actually had a lot of politics in it, like you said. It helped shape my political viewpoints. Talking a lot about the Vietnam War and Richard Nixon. And they would show examples where Richard Nixon was saying one thing and then contradicting himself in another thing.
Remind me somewhat.
Side by side. So it really kind of turned me into kind of more liberal politics.
No, that's great. I love that way that when art, you can use it as well, I don't know if it's the right word, it's a weapon, but it's a good way to get people involved in something that if not, it will be really boring.
Sure.
So no, that's great. So, but you were kind of your dream job was like work for Mad Magazine, or you have an idea of
well, my dream job would have been to have my own newspaper comic strip.
All right.
Second to that would have been working for Mad Magazine. Mad Magazine was a monthly magazine, and you would only do 3 or 4 pages a month if you worked for Mad. So it wasn't a full-time job, which is one reason I went into comic books instead of trying to get into Mad. And I did a lot of work for Marvel's version of Mad Magazine, which was Crazy Magazine.
Ah, yes.
My very first published work with Marvel was a satire of the movie Westworld for Crazy Magazine.
Really?
That I penciled and inked, written by Marv Wolfman. And Marvel paid for Marv and I to go see the movie, and they gave me glossy photos to draw from. It was great.
That's awesome. But what was the movie?
Well, I started in 74. It must have come out somewhere around 1974.
What was the name of the movie?
Oh, Westworld, with Yul Brynner as the star. It's the TV show on HBO now, kind of taking over from the movie, but the movie was way back in the 70s.
All right. Well, maybe I found it. I'm not sure. Well, correct me if I'm wrong.
All right.
So I think could be.
That's it.
All right.
They called it Worst World, yeah.
Worst World. No, I didn't know. So Westworld. We are talking about this TV show from HBO.
Yeah. Yeah, they got it from this movie.
All right. Well, I didn't know. So no, that's great. Crazy magazine. So they kind of make satires of different movies, of different
Yeah,
that
just
kind of
like
stuff.
Mad Magazine, they would do TV satires, movie satires, a lot of other humorous things.
Okay. No, that's pretty cool. So you start to work for Marvel doing this. So that's a that's the that's a cool gig, and then they propose you to start drawing like comic books, like superheroes and
Well, no, they didn't propose.
ah
uh,
okay yes.
they uh, they didn't like my more dramatic samples at the time because I had been trained, or I trained myself. I'm pretty much self-taught, but my
Mm,
foundation was in humor, so I didn't really know much about visual storytelling or
okay.
realistic anatomy or lighting or composition in the way that they do comic panels, perspective, all the things
Mm,
involved in drawing more realistic comics. I
mm,
had to kind of study up on really quickly. And I was working in the office at Marvel in the production department to start out with.
mm,
Um, that's how I got my foot in the door in the industry, working, doing lettering corrections and art corrections in the production department at Marvel. And I was working alongside Mike Esposito and Frank Giacoia, longtime
mm,
inkers for Marvel. Were had little drawing tables set up right next to where I was working. And Mike Esposito suggested that I could learn how to be an inker faster than I could learn how to be a penciler. So I had never considered just doing inking,
mm.
but I thought I'd give that a try. So I started doing background inking for Mike, and then was offered by one of the editors finally my own inking job, and my inking career kind of took off.
Mm. Yeah, no, that's great. But how you arrive to Marvel? It's like you send some samplers, you meet someone.
Well, it's very lucky coincidence. I went up from originally from Tampa, Florida, and
Mm-hmm.
sold my car to finance a trip up to New York City to start my career doing something. And actually, the first places I went were advertising agencies that my one of my art school teachers had given me names to call at
Okay.
ad agencies in New York. And turned out that all of the people the numbers he gave me were no longer working there. So
No. Well,
that didn't go anywhere. But at the time, the New York Comic Con was happening in July of '74, I think it
mm,
was, or '73 maybe. And so I figured I'd go to the Comic Con and just check it out. And I walked in the door and saw a guy that was in my high school art class in Tampa. He had just
wow.
coincidentally gone up there at the same time to try to get in to comics, and his name was Pat Broderick. If you know who Pat is, a longtime pencil artist in comics, and he and I became roommates. And he got into, at the time, DC Comics had an apprenticeship program, and so Pat
Really?
got into the DC apprenticeship program, and through going up to DC, met Neil Adams, and
Oh, all
told
right.
me I needed to meet Neil Adams. So I finally went up and showed Neil my samples. I tried getting into Marvel, and Marvel wouldn't even look at my samples. They wouldn't even. I couldn't even get
Really?
in the door.
Oh, not
They
too
didn't need
well.
anybody. So that was I couldn't even show them my work. But
Mm,
I showed it to Neil, and Neil says, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I said, "Anything that pays," because I was out of money. I had run out of the money that I got from selling my car, and I was going to have to
wow.
take a
That
bus
was a huge
home.
gamble. That
Yeah,
you need to have some real cojones to to do something like that. I really
I mean,
respect that.
there was nowhere to go in Tampa really, so
Sure.
I figured I was going to have to go to New York. And you don't know probably in France, but people in the South back in the 70s, we thought of New York as where you constantly got mugged and murdered, and it was a very dangerous place.
Yes,
I flew into LaGuardia, the airport in Queens, rather than Manhattan, and I was afraid to go into Manhattan. It took me a week to build up my courage just to go into Manhattan.
sure. Yeah,
For
because I
fear I'd be
think
murdered.
because of the news,
Yeah,
everything we're
there was a
and
lot
when
of
you went
crime.
there,
There was a
when
lot
you
of
went,
crime back then.
yeah, but when you went there, it was like the picture that you had in your head, like,
Pretty
or
much. It was kind of scary. It was like you'd see it in the movies. The subways looked scary. So I always, I'm not a tough looking guy, but I always tried to look as tough as I could so people would
yeah,
leave me alone.
yeah, for sure.
Um, but I finally, started liking Manhattan, and I walked all over the city. Um, finally, finally met Neil, and he just picked up the phone and called Marvel and got me a job in the production department just on his recommendation.
Wow, that
Yeah, so
was
I
a
owe my career
really,
to Neil.
yeah. No, that's crazy. But that's great that you have well, sometimes chance happen like that.
Hmm.
I had I don't know if you know Carlos Pacheco. Is
I know his work. I've never met him.
yeah, well, I have it on my podcast last week, and he told me a crazy story because he get into the industry because one of his friends, because he was drawing all the time at his place, and sometimes he were not happy with his work, so he just threw it away in his garbage right next to his desk. and and one time one of their friends just grabbed one of their their drawings and show it to his boss and say, yeah, this is great, call him, uh, offer him a job. So
Yeah,
sometimes chance is like that. So,
I think luck is a big part of being
mm,
successful often, and being in the right place at the right time,
yeah,
meeting the right person.
yeah, for sure.
I mean, I might have had a career in comics if I hadn't met Neil, if I'd just kept knocking on doors and working on my samples. I don't know, but
Yeah. No,
uh,
but if you didn't have the courage to take that chance and go to New York, sell your car.
yeah,
Yeah, sometimes it's a little bit of luck, but also you have to do the work. So no, that's a great story. So after you start to work for DC Comics, and what happened?
well, like I said, my inking career kind of took off, but Marvel still didn't like my penciling samples. So as I was working, I got better and better at inking, but I was
Mm,
also all the time studying everything about penciling.
mm,
So it took me about 5 years. It wasn't until 1979 that Marvel finally gave me a chance to do some. I mean, I had been penciling for crazy all that time, but to do
sure.
a regular comic book wasn't until 1979.
Mm.
It was a Marvel team up. Spider-Man and the Guardians of the Galaxy was my first penciling job on superheroes.
Oh, cool. So, but there were someone that were teaching you, or you were just learning by
I was
yourself?
trying so hard to get people to teach me, and nobody would teach me. I just had to study what other artists were doing.
Sure.
Um, and I mean, it was hard to even get critiques. Joe Rubenstein and I became friends up at Neil's studio,
Mm,
and he and I would critique each other's work. So I got some feedback from Joe. Neil would say something here and there, but not really teach me. He just made occasional
yeah.
comments.
Mm,
I just learned by studying other artists, basically.
mm. Yeah, sometimes, well, sometimes when you don't have that kind of help, you're for me it's just practice. Practice make you better in everything. The more you do it, the less difficult. It became the same with music or any art, I think. But yeah, I was expecting a little bit more solidarity from around the time, but
No,
I
yeah,
yeah, I guess
everybody was busy, you know,
yes.
and I mean, I don't remember anybody really offering to take me under their wing and teach me
Mm,
stuff. But I was lucky starting out in the production department because I saw all of the artwork come through the office from the best artists in the business.
mm,
And I could study their original art and look at how they were doing things. And then I rented space up at Neil's studio, Continuity Associates, and
mm,
watch Neil work and watch Russ Heath inking Sergeant Rock, and Jack Abel was there doing his inking.
mm,
Larry Hama and Ralph Reese. There was
yeah,
all these very good artists
mm,
that I could just sit there and look over their shoulders, and so it was a great way to learn. So I was very
yeah.
fortunate.
Oh, that's cool. And around that time, there was an artist that really, I don't know, inspire you or say, "Wow, this guy is great. I want to. I I would like to be something to something like that."
Well, when I decided to learn how to draw dramatic superhero comics,
Mm,
I just, to my eye, Neil Adams and John Buscema were the best two in the business.
mm,
So I primarily was studying Neil, and I would study Neil for more of his surface rendering, how he would delineate the muscles and how he would render things. And then John Buscema, I would study how he posed his figures, how he would construct his panels, more about visual storytelling and anatomy. I kind of studied John Buscema a lot.
mm. Yeah, both artists are great. So then you start to draw. The Marvel say, "Okay, okay, kid, we'll give you a shot."
Yeah, I
uh,
did a lot of fill-ins. I did a lot of Spider-Man fill-ins
mm,
over the next 3 years, 79 to 81. I finally when my chance on the New Mutants came up.
also, it didn't take that much time. Well, it took you a long time to learn, but then you were lucky. So how was that proposal? It's like, hey Bob, we need more mutants.
they
What
wanted
was the
they wanted to create a spinoff of the X-Men, a younger team of X-Men. You know, when the X-Men started out, they were called the teenage superheroes, and then they gradually aged up, I guess, into
mm,
their 30s or so. And so they wanted to go back to the original idea of teenage superheroes. And, you know, times had changed and they wanted to make it more multicultural,
mm,
you know, different races and ethnicities. And they wanted them to be young teenagers, like 15-year-olds.
yes.
And I guess they liked the way that I drew. Who was in it? Kitty Pryde in the X-Men stories. I could
Oh,
draw
okay.
her to look like a young girl instead of an adult, and so they figured I could handle the New Mutants. So you know, I guess everybody else was busy. I've always assumed is why they offered me the chance, but they offered me the book.
Oh, that's amazing. And uh, but I think we're talking about that, right?
Yeah, it was going to be a regular comic book.
Mm,
I'd gotten a script from Chris and was already starting to pencil the first issue.
mm,
And then right at the same time, the graphic novel line was starting up. And they were looking for projects to turn into graphic novels.
mm,
And so they needed a project for graphic novel number 4.
yeah.
And they said, oh, this new series, spin-off, it's perfect. Let's make that a graphic
Mm.
novel.
And the
And
concept of the graphic novel, they get it from where? Because here in Europe, that kind of format is kind of the standard here. We call bande dessinée.
right,
It's
right.
like big size and they get a little the inspiration from European comics
I think
or
so.
what?
Yeah, we had just started. We, when I say we, the American artists and writers,
Mm.
comic publishers had just started kind of being aware of what was going on in Europe, with the Belgian comics and French comics,
Mm.
and definitely we're looking a lot of that from. I guess where everybody noticed it was in the magazine Heavy Metal, which
Ah,
in
yes,
France was Metal Hurlant. Um,
yes,
and they had a lot of French comics in there, and I think that really got the ball rolling and had us looking at more European artwork, and probably that was a big influence on the graphic novels starting up.
mm, yeah. No, but that's I love the format of the graphic novel. Really, really is really cool. Uh, so you start to, but what was the idea? You work with Chris Claremont
Hmm.
in this one. How was the idea? He already have all the characters. There was kind of on exchange
Well, it
of
was it was he had some characters' names and powers in mind, and it was still kind of forming in his mind what characters he was going to use and what exactly their powers would be. Um,
mm,
and so we talked a lot about that over the phone and in person. I was living in Tampa actually at the time, but I flew up to New York and we met and talked a little, and then we talked over the phone after that, discussing was Sunspot going to grow big like the Hulk when he used his powers, or was he going to stay little? You know, was Cannonball going to be a big muscular guy, or what? All of that was kind of just going back and forth talking about how they were going to look. And
yeah.
Rain originally was going to be an Indian character, not a Native American, but from India.
All
Um,
right, I didn't
uh,
know that.
and Chris changed his mind and decided to make her Scottish. So a lot of discussion about who exactly was going to be on the team,
Mm,
and he, of course, he's not an artist, so he needed someone to give him some visuals of what they would look like.
yes.
So then they brought me on, and I said, well, you know, I like drawing girls. Let's have more girls on the team than guys. And Chris likes writing female characters, so he was all
Mm,
for that as well. But you know, up until that time, as far as I remember, every superhero team had more males than females. There was like a token female.
yes, for sure.
Yeah, so we it was very important to us to have them different uh, uh, different races and different
Mm,
cultures. And you know, as later on, it was a big issue how dark skinned Sunspot should be in the movie. You know, we created him to be dark skinned, and
yes.
even in the comics, there were comics where they didn't make him dark skinned enough. So it's an issue in our country. Seems to be they have a hard time making
Yeah, for sure.
people making the stars of these stories dark skinned.
Yeah, I think maybe at the beginning they see it backwards, like we 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 need to add more white people because of the white people that buy our comics.
Right.
That's is not very clever because of course you include more diversity, you will increase more people that will buy your comic. But well, I think around the time maybe there was a different logic. The same with women. Women don't buy comic books, so
Mhm.
they don't put too much women on it.
I think
So
that
I don't
was
know.
the thinking at the time. You know, old older people in the business.
Mm.
As more younger people got in the business and more women came into the business,
Yeah.
and it helped that our editor on the New Mutants was a woman, Louise Simonson.
Mm.
So she had a feminine opinion that she could always chip in. And like I say, Chris is excellent at writing women's characters. So that was a big plus. And then it just, times had been changing and it was time for more multiculturalism.
Yeah. No, that was really cool. It feels a lot like, well, sometimes what Star Trek was doing at the beginning, tried to create a team with multiple different races, with different cultures. And no, it was really cool. And the design of the character I really like, especially Sunspot. I was thinking was so cool. The concept of this character. No, it was really. I think it was great. And talking about the New Mutants, I guess you saw the movie.
Finally, I saw it. We had COVID
Yes.
happen around the world right as the movie was supposed to premiere. I was
Mm.
going to have a local party at our local theater when the movie premiered and invite a lot of people to come and meet me. And we were going to make a big deal about the opening of the movie. And then COVID happened and we couldn't go into the theaters. And it was
Mm.
delayed. Kicked back a year and then it was delayed again. It was a mess finally getting to the screen.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
for a long time, we weren't even sure it was ever going to make it to the screen.
Mm.
There was talk about whether it would just go straight to digital on TV or whether it be in theaters. It finally did go to theaters, and I was afraid to go into a movie theater to see it. I didn't want to get
Yeah.
COVID. So a friend of mine finally sent me a bootleg copy of it. Is how I finally saw it on my TV.
All right. So, and what do you think when you saw it?
I mean, my initial problem with it was that the things that I contributed to the team
Hmm.
didn't really translate into the movie. So, Sam was supposed to be a lot taller than Roberto, and
Mm.
that's not in the movie. Um, Rain is supposed to have red hair and be very, freckly and light skinned. And I love Maisie Williams, and I liked her in the role, but it didn't look the way my Rain looked.
Yes.
And Danny Moonstar, Blue Hunt did a good job as Danny Moonstar, but my Danny Moonstar always wore her hair in braids.
Mm.
Not because I figured Indians always have to have braids, but just that's kind of gave her a signature look.
Mm.
And of course, they didn't have her in braids in the movie. So
Yeah.
Sam didn't have the big ears and looked real gawky the way I tried to draw him in the comics. So
Mm.
I just felt like, and then the one character I didn't design, Magic, looked spot on exactly the way she did in the movie in the comics. So
Yes.
I just kind of felt a little insulted
Mm.
by the what they did visually with the movie.
Mm.
I thought doing it as a horror film uh, could be a good marketing decision to bring a different audience into the superhero movies
Yes.
if they did it the right way and
Mm.
if they introduced the characters. Because the average person didn't read comics and they don't know who these characters are, and
Yes.
um, you didn't want it just to be another horror film with a bunch of teenagers. You wanted them to be superheroes.
Mm.
So I would rather have seen them do it as a different kind of movie where you met the characters first and then maybe do it as a horror movie if you wanted. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I had issues with it, but then when I saw it, It was entertaining. I enjoyed it.
Mm,
I didn't think it was a great movie, but it was a fun movie,
yeah.
and I thought it was successful enough at what they were trying to do with it.
Mm,
Which again is not at all what I would have done, but I realize making movies is a different business than making comics, and they have
mm,
certain priorities in movies that we don't have in comics. And they also have no obligation really to make it anything like the comic. They can
mm.
make it nothing like the comic if they want. It's a different business.
Yeah, for sure. There's so much money involved that they are really scared to to lose money. So they try to reach the right audience or the more broader audience that they can. And
Sure.
sometimes that means they don't respect the source material. But I think with all the most of the Marvel movies like Avengers, Captain America, Iron Man is a proof that when you respect the source material, you can be successful. It's just that sometimes there are other companies that don't do that. Like I don't know, Fantastic Four, for example, the last Fantastic Four they made was like really was a cool movie, but was not the Fantastic Four.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously there are certain things you have to change. The costumes we use in comics can look silly on the screen in real life.
Hmm,
So I can understand changing costumes. But there's so many really good storylines that we've done in the comics that would make
yeah.
excellent movies.
Hmm,
And I think what it is the movie writers want to write their own stories. You know, they don't want
hmm,
to repeat what we've done in the comics. They want to be original.
yeah.
And again, I understand that. But I think often when they use more from the comics, it can make it a better movie. I thought the Iron Man movies were very successful and worked really well because they made them very similar to the Iron Man comics.
Yes,
Um,
is to respect the source material. It's not
yeah,
that complicated. So, but so you that was just a little post because I'm really interested in your career. So then you work for the New Mutants, and then what happened? They you start to work in another project, or
yeah. What happened was, I started my career doing a lot of inking and became one of the top inkers at Marvel and DC. And I had a way that I wanted my art to look. Um, and then when I was penciling the New Mutants, it was behind schedule from the beginning. The graphic novel was already late when they decided to make it a graphic novel. I had to rush through the graphic novel, and then I had to rush on to the first issue and the second issue and the third issue, and I was just drawing as fast as I could draw. And you remember, I had only started penciling a couple years before that,
yes.
and I was still learning visual storytelling. I was still having to think how I should pose the figures,
Mm,
how I should set up my shots. Everything involves, there's so much you have to think about, and I needed time to think, and I didn't have any time to think. I was just drawing as fast as I could draw, and so I wasn't happy with the way the art was looking.
mm,
I had an inker who was trying very hard, but he was a kind of a beginning inker as well,
mm,
and because my pencils were so rushed, it was difficult for him to make the inking look the way I would like for it to look. So basically, I wanted to ink myself, and I just wasn't fast enough to be penciling and inking. So
mm,
after 3 issues, I asked the editor if I could start inking. I said, maybe I can control the look of the book better if I'm inking somebody's breakdowns instead of penciling for somebody else to ink. So they got Sal Buscema to start doing breakdown pencils for me. And the problem with that was, as good as Sal is, he was drawing like 3 books a month, really doing a lot of pages
wow.
every day. And again, didn't spend that much time thinking about the absolute best way he could set up his shots. He had standard shots that he used, standard ways of posing his figures that he would use, that were easy and automatic for him, that he could do quickly. But since I was doing breakdowns rather than finished pencils, I figured I could change it as much as I wanted. So I pretty much radically changed a lot of his drawing to look more like my drawing. But then after 3 or 4 issues of that, I just got tired of inking Sal's layouts. You know, he has a different way of telling a story than I do. It's very complicated when you work with another artist, whether you're penciling or whether you're inking. You know, you have to
have a chemistry.
You have to have a chemistry, and I just wasn't. It's just not what I wanted to do. You know, I really wanted to be doing art the way I wanted it to look, and it just wasn't happening on the New Mutants. So I ended up leaving. And Louise, the editor, told me at the time, you know, this is a big mistake. You really shouldn't quit this book. But I wasn't happy. So I felt I had to leave. And, you know, in retrospect, financially, it would have been good to stay with it. I would have made a lot of money in royalties if I'd stayed on the title, and would have probably had become a bigger comic book, you know, celebrity, so to speak, if I'd stayed on the New Mutants. But then again, I wouldn't have been able to draw all the projects that I was able to do after I left the New Mutants. So right after I left the New Mutants, I started penciling Star Wars. And I wouldn't have been able to do Star Wars maybe if I hadn't left the New Mutants. And that was another big project that I'm very happy that I was involved with.
Yeah, for sure. We can have everything. Sometimes we need to choose. And I for me, that relation between the inker, the penciler, and the writer is. I was talking with other artists too. Is really like a band, like a rock band.
Exactly.
If there's no chemistry, it's hard to make stuff to work. So yeah, it's the same with music. Sometimes it's good to know when it's the time to leave and try something else. Because
I mean, even if there is chemistry, if you think of the Beatles, they got along well together and did wonderful music together, but then they each had individual personalities where they wanted to do more individual music as well. You know, I never wanted to be just an inker. My inking career kind of took off, but I always thought of it as a total job, doing penciling and inking and lettering and coloring. And I guess if I had made more of an effort, I could have done more jobs where I did it all myself. But early on, it was very hard to find those jobs. Everything was a monthly comic. So you ended up doing one thing rather than, you know, multiple chores.
Yeah, for sure. And so right after the New Mutants, you start to work on Star Wars?
I was very lucky. They needed somebody to do Star Wars. Tom Palmer, my favorite inker, one of the main people I studied when I was learning how to ink, was the regular inker on Star Wars, and he wanted me to pencil breakdowns rather than finish pencils. And I was happy to do that because I wanted to see what he would do with my breakdowns. As an inker, I do certain things, and I wanted to see how he would do it differently than what I would do. And so it was very interesting for me and educational for me to see what he did with my pencils, where he would stay close to my pencils and where he would vary from my pencils, what changes he would make. And he did some wonderful things over my pencils.
Yeah, no, it looked great.
It did, and I loved working with him on Star Wars. But then after a few issues, I wasn't thrilled with the stories that we were doing, and again, I basically I wanted to ink myself. I just, as good as Tom's inks were, they weren't my inks, and
Hmm.
I didn't want to just pencil breakdowns. Um,
Yes.
Penciling breakdowns, the layouts is kind of the least exciting thing for me. I enjoy it when I'm doing more, but if I'm just doing the storytelling, that's not where my interest is.
Yeah. No, I completely understand. But you were a fan of Star Wars around that time, or
Well,
not
sure,
that much?
wasn't everybody? I don't know anybody that didn't like Star Wars early
Yes.
on.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
So you were not happy with the stories because I don't know why are
Well, early on, the movies were still coming out, and they didn't want us stepping on their toes. They didn't want us to do stories that they might be doing in the movies. So every story had to go through Lucasfilm and be uh, kind of rejected or accepted and changed. And
really they have to be approved by him.
yeah, so the writers were having a hard time, and I just felt some of the stuff we were doing wasn't that exciting.
Yeah.
It wasn't so much the stories; it was more that I just didn't want to be just doing nothing but penciling breakdowns all the time.
Mm,
So again, I could have stayed on Star Wars, but I wanted to do something else. So I
yeah.
left Star Wars, and I think that's maybe when I started inking the Hulk
Mm.
over Dale Keown,
Oh,
or
cool.
I might have done some other. I did some penciling for Pacific Comics. Um, I did some other comic companies. It's hard to remember the timeline of everything I did, but I know somewhere
Yeah,
after
for
that
sure.
I was starting to Dale on the Hulk.
Oh, that's great. And yeah, it was a big title, the
That
Hulk.
was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed working with Dale, and I was working away inking Dale, and Jerry Ordway came up to Marvel one day when I was there, and he said, "You know, I always liked your penciling. Why aren't you doing more penciling?" And I said, I don't know. I just kind of am busy inking right now. I haven't really thought about it that much. And he said, "Well, we need a penciler on Superman right now. Would you be interested in doing a tryout for Superman?" And I said, "Sure." You know, Superman was the main comic I read as a kid, so I
Mm.
always had a sentimental place for Superman. And so I went over to DC and did an issue of Superman that they liked, and so then I became one of the regular artists on Action Comics with Superman.
Wow. So I was just looking. So these were, yeah, I remember. These were your inks on these issues.
Yeah, I did a lot of inking over what's his name?
Dale, how you say? Dale
Well,
New?
Ron Wagner was one. Well, yeah, Del Keown.
Dale Kian.
Ron Wagner did a lot
Yeah,
of the covers for those Hulk issues.
yeah,
Steve Geiger did a lot of covers that I inked. Um,
yeah. No, that's some cool stuff. So after that was Action Comics, right?
mhm. Yeah.
And yeah, for sure, it's the one of the few comics that you were reading when you were a kid. So I guess was really cool have that have the chance.
It was an honor I felt to be able to draw Superman. I mean, that when I was a kid reading Superman, I wasn't I didn't really like the artists they had on it. Usually, Kurt Swan. I
Mm,
didn't think his art was that interesting. And yet, when I went to New York to that Comic Con back in 1973, um, one of the first things I saw was an original by Kurt Swan. It was just amazing. It was so well drawn. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't imagine doing something like that myself.
Mm.
And so when I got the job to draw Superman, I felt like I was following in his footsteps, and I really had to try to do really good work, is the best work I could do. But again, I was doing breakdown pencils rather than finished pencils.
Sure.
So not really looking the way I would have preferred that it looked, even though I had very good inker breeding starting out.
Yeah. No, for sure. No, that I remember these issues. They were really cool.
But it was very great to be able to draw that issue where Superman finally reveals to Lois that Clark Kent is Superman. I mean, what more could you ask for than to draw that issue? So
Yes.
very honored.
Yeah. No, that was good. Good. Good work there.
And that one I got
So
to ink myself.
yeah, that's great. So around that time, you have to choose like you work for Marvel or you work for DC, or you can work for both without any any problem.
It was very funny. Starting out, I was under contract for Marvel when I first started penciling,
Hmm.
and DC offered me some work that I couldn't take because I was under contract for Marvel.
Ah, so was an exclusive contract.
Yeah, and then I said, "Well, I want to work for DC too." So I stopped my contract with Marvel, and when I went over to DC, they gave me a $5 a page raise. And so then I was working for DC, and Marvel said, "Well, come back over here. We'll give you a raise." So
No, really?
I started bouncing back and forth. Every time I would switch companies, I'd get a raise. So I
That's
just
awesome.
went back and forth a lot.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they were kind of increasing
Competitive.
yeah, but for you. No, that's great. So then you start to work for Action Comic, and then what happened?
Well, again, I was mostly penciling for other inkers. I
Mhm.
was able to do 3 issues in a row where I penciled and inked. And then I was penciling again for another inker, Denny Rodier. And Denny, another excellent inker, but it's not my inking. And I just got tired of penciling breakdowns. I wanted to do complete art.
Mm.
So I left Superman and went back to Marvel and did a mini series of Venom, where I penciled it.
Ah, the enemy within.
Yeah, The Enemy Within, a 3-issue miniseries with Venom.
Mm. Yeah, I
And
remember
after,
that cover is it's awesome.
well, that cover, the first issue cover, Marvel was doing a lot of gimmicky covers at that time. You know, a lot of foil covers and every little trick they could think of with their covers. So they wanted to do some kind of designy cover. And I said, "Oh, come on, it's my miniseries. You got to let me do the cover." And they didn't want just a standard cover, so they said, "Well, do something and see if we like it." So I came up with this cover design, and they liked it and went with it and made it a glow in the dark cover.
Yeah, yeah, I remember. It's a great cover. Really minimalistic, but it worked really well, especially if you on a T-shirt
Yeah,
or in anything.
yeah,
And
it
yeah,
worked
no, it
so
was
well.
yeah. So and you you enjoy to work on that character?
Not really. I'm not a fan of Venom. Not at all my kind of. You know, I'm a humor artist at heart.
Yes. Yeah, it's too
Venom
serious.
is just not the character for me. But
Yeah.
you know, I figured, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to try my best, and
Mm.
I actually think I did some of my best work on that miniseries.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but around that time, I remember the Punisher was start to getting big.
Hmm.
So so Marvel they really want to add a kind of an edge to all the characters. I don't know, make it a little bit more darker, a little bit more edgy. I don't know.
I actually
Um,
think I don't know if that started with the Punisher or Dark Knight at DC. Frank Miller,
uh,
right around that time, all the comics started getting very dark and violent.
yes, yes.
Not at all the way
Thanks,
I like.
Frank Miller.
Yeah,
Yes.
but I'm a commercial artist. I chose to draw stories with characters owned by other people instead of creating my own characters in comics. And
Mm,
it's a job, and you're hired to do a job. And so I just tried to do my best,
for
whatever
sure.
job I was given.
But um, I'm kind of not sure about the timeline. Um, when you make this miniseries, was it the same time Todd McFarlane was drawing Spider-Man, or was before
That
or
was
after?
1994 when I did that, and let me think. I think Todd was after that, wasn't it, or was it before that?
I'm
I'm
not
not
sure
sure either because I inked a
because
couple issues of Todd.
yes,
Um,
I was wondering because of the tongue. So I don't know. Maybe you influence Todd McFarlane to
Possibly.
do.
I think that was before he did his character for sure. Gosh, I don't know. You'd have to check and see the timeline.
Yeah, for sure.
I know I
But
wasn't influenced by Todd. I was looking at who did I look at for Venom? Some previous artist that was doing the regular comic. I don't even remember now.
oh, it's okay. No, but it's a great design. And so then you start to keep working for Marvel.
After that, I did another mini series with Spider-Man and the Punisher that I penciled and inked 3 issues.
What?
Um, that was called what was the name of that?
Spider-Man and the
It
Punisher?
was Spider-Man was the title, issue number 32. Um, Vengeance, Spider-Man Vengeance, written by Stephen Grant.
Hmm. What? All right. Well, wait, I'm not sure if I found it. Did you? No?
Yeah, up in
This
the top is the middle. Well, right there is that's the first issue.
Vengeance Part 1.
Uh-huh.
Ah, okay.
So I did 3 issues of that, pencils and inks.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I think I had those. And that, well, I guess you either enjoy working with the Punisher. It's even darker than Venom.
Yeah, again, I don't like drawing guns. They're difficult to draw. You've got to get them the right size for the hand that is holding them.
Yes.
And not knowing much about guns, it was constant looking at reference and trying to figure out all the little details on the guns. Not
Mm,
really anything fun for me. But I always enjoyed drawing Spider-Man. And
mm,
yeah, and I think that's some of my best work on that miniseries.
mm. Yeah. I'm sure the suit sometimes is a pain in the ass, right? With all the web. No?
I mean, there's so many things about comics that are tedious and difficult. But then again, it's a pretty fun job. You can't really
Yeah.
complain when you're drawing
It's
comics.
better than working in a bank.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, crushing numbers. Yeah, no, for sure. No, but I remember these issues. They were great. So then you keep working for Marvel, or you switch again to?
Actually, I went back to DC. At the time, like you say, McFarlane was around and Image Comics was around, and they were looking for the next big hotshot artist.
Hmm.
Uh, they were trying to bring new artists in, and so it started getting harder to find work. as an older artist.
Really?
Yeah, so I could still get
Mm.
work. I could find it, but it started getting harder.
All
Um,
right.
and DC offered me this inking job. I think I started inking Graham Nolan on Detective Comics after
Mm.
that. Or maybe I was inking George Perez on New Titans and Wonder Woman. I forget which I did first. Probably did Teen Titans and Wonder Woman, and then Detective. But they were keeping me really busy doing inking. And I had little kids that I was raising my kids and supporting my family. So at the
Sure.
time, I was just thinking about the family a lot more than my career. Um,
Mm.
and so wasn't
Not a bad.
really,
It's not a bad thing.
yeah, well, I wasn't really looking for certain jobs. I was just trying to stay employed and get steady
Mm.
work.
Yes.
So I didn't think that much about it, whether I was penciling or inking.
Yeah, for sure. So you stay with DC kind of many years?
I stayed with DC through the 90s. And then in the 2000s, um, started, I did some work for Techno Comics on a character called Mr. Hero,
Mm.
a startup down in Florida. Did a few issues of that inking. And then I did some work, or that later. I think around that time, I started seeing what else was available besides comics. And so
Sure.
I got a job designing T-shirts for a clothing Echo clothing company for a while.
Oh, cool.
Um, they had a branch of Echo called Sweat. Was it Sweat Equity or something like that?
Mm.
I was designing T-shirts for a few months, and then my wife had always wanted me to do a children's book, so I finally had some time and figured I would take a shot at drawing a children's book. So
Mm.
that's when I did my superhero ABC book. Um,
Yeah, that's a
and
great idea.
well, it was actually my wife's idea, so I have to give her credit for that. I was trying to come up with what kind of children's book to do, and couldn't decide. I was going to do some funny animals or little kids or something. And my wife said, "Well, you know so much about superheroes. Why don't you just do a superhero alphabet book?"
Mm.
And I said, "Great idea. I should have thought of that." Um, and so I don't know why I thought I should write it myself because I'd never written anything, but I liked doing humor, and I was just doing silly superheroes, and so just started coming up with some alliteration and these funny phrases with these goofy heroes like Bubble Man blows big bubbles at bad guys or bullies or whatever. So it was a lot of fun, and I realized why there were no other superhero alphabet books out there. It's really hard to come up with original superheroes because they've been doing them for decades, and every name I would come up with was already taken.
Mm.
So I had to just use kind of, like I said, silly names.
Yeah.
Just it wasn't the name wasn't as important as whether I could make it cute and humorous for kids.
Yeah. No, but it's a great idea, especially for kids. It's way more fun than learn this way that in a more traditional way because kids
Yeah,
they love superheroes.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, I've heard from so many stories from my readers. These parents couldn't get their kids interested in reading, and then their kid would see my book, and because it was superheroes, they were drawn to the book, and then they started reading. So
Yeah.
I'm really glad I was able to do it. It brought a whole new audience to my work, and I had such an impact on so many kids. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I want to invite everyone to your page that now I have so many stuff open that I lost it. Uh, but there is any project that you are working at the moment or this
Right now, I'm basically retired from comics. I'm not looking to get work in comics anymore. On the insides, the little panels,
Sure.
I'm tired of drawing it. So I still do occasional covers,
Mm.
variant covers. But I really want, I didn't in the beginning of my career, but now I'd like to do some painting.
Oh,
Just
cool.
standard painting, not necessarily anything to do with comics, just landscapes and still
Sure.
lifes, whatever. So I'm not really looking for work in comics, but
Yes.
I've
What
almost
about the do some satire?
I, I'd enjoy it, but again, I don't want to draw the tiny little panels. I'm looking to do
Mm,
some bigger stuff now.
yes. No, but
So
that's a good idea too. It's good to try different stuff when you're an artist.
yeah, you don't want to do the same thing all the time.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
most of my career, I was working in black and white, and I like color. I like painting. So
Mm,
I just right now I'm kind of in the mood to do some painting.
yes. So, well, I want to invite everyone to bookmccloud.com. And I saw you're selling some cool stuff. Maybe I will buy some.
Well, there's
uh,
a lot of prints, a lot of book. I've had some booklets that I did for people to. Basically, I did them to have something to sell at conventions,
sure.
and then
But
my
there's
original
some,
artworks on my website.
yeah. No, they're really cool stuff. So I really thank you for your time. Was really cool talking with you and share some of your cool stories. And I don't know. I thank you for your time.
All right.
It
Well,
was
thank you for
really
having me. It was fun. I enjoyed it.
cool. Me too. So have good luck with the painting and with the all the work that you are doing at your home at the moment.
All right. Thank you very much. Nice
So
talking to you.
see you.
Bye bye.